surprise shone light from distant northern skies. At that point, I realized I don't know where it comes from, but I know it's okay. This is all an illusion, and I'm willing to play.
Welcome to the Quantum Guide Show, interviews with awakened masters as they share their quantum work with you. The Quantum Guide Show is produced by Karen Holton, creator of the 9 Steps to Quantum Health Transformation, a free 9-step online course to give you the tips and resources you need to thrive. Karen lost and continues to keep off 178 pounds of surplus body weight as she made her dreams come true. Whether you are awakening to the ascension process or simply want a wiser, more efficient lifestyle, this program is for you. No strings attached. The Quantum Guide Show is brought to you in part by Zendome's Orgonite, Karen's unique brand of orgone generators, ethically sourced, handmade, and double charged for maximum effect. Find out how orgone generators work and what they can do for you. Don't be fooled by imitations. Check out Karen's current selection, only available from her website, KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com, and on Facebook, facebook.com/Quantum Health Transformation. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to the Quantum Guide Show. Today in episode 62, my returning guest is Dave Petrella. Dave is an astrologer, biologist, spiritual guide, and Oak Island theorist. He's traveled to all 50 states and most of Canada doing research. Dave has studied world religions extensively along with Eastern medicine, metaphysics, and topics related to extraterrestrial intelligence. In this episode, Dave and I are going to discuss more about the Kuiper Belt and the Oort Cloud. Join us as we make sense of the mainstream model of our solar system and the interesting implications for astrology and flat Earth theory. Dave is available for teaching, birth charts, relationship matching, spiritual guidance, and many other topics. And he is available on Facebook, Instagram, and by email. And the links will be in the description below. I also want to add that Dave has his own show, and it will be live on Friday night, which is March the 25th, coming up the end of this week. It starts at 8 p.m. Eastern time. It's called East of Astrology. And it's part of, his show is part of the Experiencer Support Association YouTube page. So check Dave out if you want the link. He'll have it on his Facebook page. I know that for sure. And anything you want to add to that would be great. And Dave, welcome to the show.
Hey, Karen. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So we're going to talk about, did you want to add anything about your show on Friday night?
Oh, it sounds good. It's the topic this month is going to be flat Earth. And it's really the last Friday of every month. So it's a different topic every month, you know, and so I cover something different. And I really just like for people to see generally how to do good science. There are astrological aspects in every presentation I do, but I also want people to see how to try to objectively look at both sides of everything so they can come out with a good understanding, try to be unbiased, look at all the information, how to organize their thoughts, collect data, all that kind of stuff. And it's also very interactive. So, you know, come on out and feel free to ask your questions.
Yeah, I really enjoy your show, Dave. So I'll be there and I'll have some questions. And so I just pulled up here to start with a picture of the Kuiper Belt. Now, I'm not sure if it's pronounced Cooper or how did you pronounce it, Dave?
I usually say Kuiper.
Kuiper. Okay, it might be called the Kuiper Belt. But these are just a few images so that the viewers can get familiar with what we're talking about, what we're discussing today. And so the Kuiper Belt is actually a band that surrounds our solar system, according to mainstream science. And it's very large. It's outside of the actual solar system itself. And Dave, do you have any idea what it's actually made out of?
Yeah, Karen, it's basically mostly icy bodies, and that includes different elements actually, and different molecules and things. Some of it's water, some of it's methane, some of it is, what's the other one I wrote down here? Ammonia, right? Ammonia. And it's in a crystalline structure. Anytime you have ice, you have crystals forming. And so really what that means is that it's a bunch of icy particles. They're in the ice state. And there's a lot of them. There's a huge number of them in the Kuiper Belt. One of the objects that people know of, the most really famous object, the one that people would have heard of course, is the recently demoted planet of Pluto.
Mm-hmm.
Pluto is the largest object in the Kuiper Belt, and Pluto itself is an icy body. So, I would expect, I'm sure there's rock too, fragments of rock and various types of ices, like I said, different elements, and different structure and compounds and stuff like that. But it's basically a bunch of icy bodies. Not the volume. I think I read that the volume of the Kuiper Belt is actually, it has less mass than the mass of the Earth. And we're talking about a huge belt, obviously, that goes in a roughly, it's not really a circle. It's more like an elliptoid shape around the entire solar system, just outside of Neptune's orbit. So it's a large area, but the mass is very low. It's less mass than Earth, is what I've read. So that's kind of the description for you.
Would those icy crystals be reflective, do you think, to light?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So that was one thing that I want to talk about today. We don't have to get into it too much right now because we can come back to it. But that was, if our sun is at the center, you would think that there would be reflection from the Kuiper Belt back to an observer. If we can see stars and other other constellations and things, we should be able to see that Kuiper Belt. And I've never seen it, and I've never heard of anybody else seeing it either. And I thought if it was reflective, it would reflect the light from the sun. And I've never seen evidence of it. So I'm kind of going to be on the side of thinking that maybe it's not even real. I don't know. Here's another image of it. And it shows some of our, I don't know what you want to call them. Are they satellites, Dave, or would they be spaceships? Pioneer 11 and Voyager 1?
I believe they are. Yeah, they're probably out there taking photographs. I would imagine that's what they are.
Yeah, so they're not really traveling with people, but they've got equipment, and their job is to, at least as far as I understand, is to take pictures. We can see on the right, there's Pioneer 10. Below there's Voyager 2. So my big question too, that can be part of our conversation when we get into it, is how come there's no pictures? Where are all the pictures? There's none. All there are is artists' renditions and images like this one that we're looking at now. So the other thing I wanted to ask you, Dave, is there radiation or excessive radiation as part of the Kuiper Belt? Do you know?
Well, I'm imagining that most of the radiation is coming from the sun directly, I would say.
Yeah.
Well, I guess most astronomers, and I'm an astrologer, I'm not really an astronomer, but I know enough about it where I can talk about it easily. But most of the primary radiation source in our solar system, of course, I would say is coming from the sun because it's closest, and it's nuclear fusion. So of course you're going to get radiation. We're protected from that on Earth because of the atmosphere, the various layers of atmosphere. And if we weren't, we would all not be alive because it's constantly, the solar wind is constantly hitting the Earth. And that's what creates the aurora borealis and the aurora australis. is that solar wind, which is radiation coming from the sun. I think that far out, Karen, you know, in the outer solar system where you'd have Kuiper Belt and Pluto and everything, I think, you know, if you don't have an atmosphere, then yeah, it's going to be, I would say, a fair amount of radiation. But also given the fact of the supposed distance, you know, I mean, I think if we were to ask astronomers, they could probably come up with a fairly accurate calculation. If you know, then the question becomes, is their starting premise, is that actually correct? And if their starting premise is not correct, for instance, if the sun is not at the center, but maybe the Earth is at the center, which is called the geocentric model, which was the ancient model, then that changes things. There's other things that change things in terms of if we believe that light moves the way it does, if we take into account quantum physics and all this stuff. So it's like, you know, for me, I think that the objective of science is to do the best possible job you can to explain things. But you really need to be careful not to put like a final stamp on it, because first of all, that's according to what your starting point and your starting assumptions. If one of those starting assumptions is wrong, then you really kind of have to put your conclusion in the trash can, because you can't have a starting basis that's off point and then assume that you're going to be able to have a valid conclusion. That's really bad science.
Yeah, that
but
makes
in any
perfect sense.
Right. In any case, according to conventional physics, what I would say, and I'm not an astronomer, I'm an astrologer, but what I would say is that it's probably fairly minimal radiation by the time you get out to the Kuiper Belt, because it's so far away from the sun, supposedly. I don't know, I don't think Pluto is supposed to have an atmosphere. I think it's just an icy body, essentially. So if you were to be on Pluto, you're not going to be getting probably a lot of shielding or protection. And that's why when you're on the vacuum too, you have to have the special metal sidings and stuff on the edge of your spacecraft, because otherwise you're going to get blasted with, you're going to directly get blasted with radiation. And they have to be very careful with that. And I think like tinting the windows and space shuttles and everything, because there's no, well, that's actually up for debate too, but I would say there's very minimal atmosphere. When we talk later on, when we talk about what's kind of beyond the Kuiper Belt, I think that it's called the heliosphere, which is the influence. It's the area that the sun has direct influence on within the solar system. I personally believe that there's probably, we might not define it as atmosphere. It's not the same dense atmosphere that we have on Earth, but I think there's still probably something all the way out to the edge of the solar system in terms of a very, very nominal amount of something. I mean, it might be barely, but it's probably still some particles here and there. You know, you could say, yeah, it's an atmosphere, but it's like 1/1000,000% of what it is on, probably less than that, on Earth or something.
Yeah, certainly not life sustaining. One of the reasons that I actually have trouble accepting that humans have been on the moon is, number one, the radiation. And you take a look at the pictures of the so-called spaceships that they landed on the moon in, and they're just like tinfoil, they're crappy, you know, and you wonder how they could, be okay with all that. Then the other reason why I think they didn't go is because then they've only recently discovered that there is an atmosphere on the moon. Well, then how come the guys that are so-called supposed to have gone there, how come they don't mention anything about an atmosphere on the moon? So there's just so many inconsistencies. But I don't want to get into government lying at this point, because we that could be a whole conversation in itself too. But here the image is of the Kuiper Belt, and you can see that it fits inside of the Oort Cloud. And it's kind of like an egg with the yolk in the middle. And so our solar system is, according to these images, is like the yolk of an egg. But the difference is the Kuiper Belt is just a belt that goes around. So depending, if you were at the very top, I'm not sure which of these is Earth, but if you're at the very top of the Earth and you're looking at the stars up above, you might not see the Kuiper Belt, but the Oort Cloud surrounds everything like the shell on an egg. And in this picture, you can see at the top, the orange track represents the typical Kuiper Belt orbit, and Pluto's orbit is represented by the yellow ring. And all of that is nestled in the very, very center of this massive thing they call the Oort Cloud. Dave, do you want to add anything about that?
Yeah, I can add a lot to that, Karen. The first thing is that I want people to see, actually, this is a really good diagram to show this, but I want people to see two separate concepts here. The first one is the concept of the disk, which, you know, I'm doing my presentation on Friday. I'll be talking about flat Earth. Flat Earth is represented by sometimes it's called a disk. It's a flat disk, or like a dinner plate almost. And so you can see the Kuiper Belt is in that formation, generally speaking, at the center of the Oort Cloud there. It's a disk, you know, or it's even the, say, like the rings of Saturn or something like that. It's kind of like a disk. It's not a sphere. And the second concept I want people to see is the concept of the sphere. For all the people that believe that the Earth is the shape of a sphere or a globe, you can see that represented also, and that's represented in the shape of the Oort Cloud, which it's not a disk. It surrounds the disk, actually. So I want to add a couple other things here. I just want to mention that almost all of the ancient models of the solar system are based on a flat Earth disk, and you have through the center of that disk, instead of looking down on, let me think about that. Instead of looking at that, well, I guess it depends on the image, but okay, so flat Earth disk in the center. Through the center of that, you have what's called Mount Meru, or the cosmic axis, or the cosmic tree. It has so many names to it. And along that axis, if you have a flat disk, like sitting on the table, then you're going to have that axis going directly perpendicular to that table at the very center of that disk. Along that axis are what are called the 10 spheres. And each of these, the sphere it's a vault or a dome. And it's a dome over the flat disk and actually under the flat disk too, because you have to remember that we're sitting in a vacuum. So underneath is, in some ways, it's not any different than above. Depends on your perspective, but you can pass things above it and below it. And so all the planets, each one of the 10 traditional planets are actually in one of those 10 spheres. Mm-hmm. Now, when you get up to, this is what's very interesting to me and how it correlates to the model that I've been teaching, I would say, since 2015, flat Earth model, and the flat Earth model for astrology. And when I do astrology, this is how I also explain the concepts and how I relate things. But in the ninth sphere contains Neptune. Now, the Kuiper Belt, this would be very interesting to you, Karen. You can see the correlation. The Kuiper Belt begins essentially just outside of the orbit of Neptune. And some astronomers actually believe that a few of the moons of Neptune actually were taken from the Kuiper Belt by, you say, the mass or the gravity or whatever, however you want to define it. Again, it's all these terms, depending on how you're doing science, are going to be different. But because it's so large and has so much influence, it might have taken a few objects from the Kuiper Belt. They may have become moons. I don't necessarily think that's true, but it's a good hypothesis for sure. Mm-hmm. And so past that, like I was saying, it actually contains Pluto. The Kuiper Belt does contain Pluto. It's the largest body in the Kuiper Belt. It's also made of ice, combination between ice and rock, essentially, different kinds of ice. The ninth sphere in the flat Earth model, or the traditional model of the solar system, is called, there's actually a name for it, it's called the crystalline sea. I'm not, you know, this is actually how it is. This is how I've been teaching it for a long time. And so when you have astronomical data points and observations lining up with traditional models, it doesn't talk about, in the traditional solar system model does not talk about a crystalline sea anywhere else except in the ninth sphere. And that just so happens to be where the Kuiper Belt is. It starts just past Neptune. Neptune rules the crystalline sea, which is true. Neptune's watching it just inside the orbit of the Kuiper Belt. And Pluto is sitting inside the Kuiper Belt. And we have to remember too that Pluto was recently demoted to a planetoid because there's a lot of other icy bodies of pretty close to similar size and pretty much identical makeup. And I'm trying to remember the term they use. It's a really scientific term, but basically the idea is there's a frequency resonance between Neptune and the bodies of the Kuiper Belt. And pretty much, I guess, depending on where you are in that belt, the resonances are the same, in the same similar ratio to Neptune. So the idea is that for there to be an actual planet, and I was reading this the other day too, it has to basically clear the space in its orbit. So it has to be the ruler of its own orbit. And if you have a bunch of inarticulate particles and pieces of rock and ice just out there, kind of like without any real organizational pattern, then that's not really, they're not considering that a planet because it's not clearing its space. It's not the master of its domain. It's just a part of a big disk. That's why it was demoted. And then the other thing is those two reasons. And then the other thing I want to mention really quick is that leaves in traditional astrology or Western astrology, also called tropical astrology, which is what I do, that leaves a space for an additional planet. So then the question I have, well, if Pluto is not Pluto in astrology, then what is it? And this is when it gets really, 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 really interesting. And again, the calculations, what I know is that my software is accurate. The calculations are accurate. So the only thing is that I don't know exactly where that calculation is being taken from. Maybe it's not being taken from Pluto and they're just saying it's Pluto. I think it's being taken from something past Pluto, which I think you and I have talked about before, Karen. I think you've heard me mention it too, which would be the 10th planet. Sitchin calls it the 12th planet. I call it the 10th planet, which is Nibiru. And that would be past the Kuiper Belt for me. And it would also be invisible for me. But it would be a very large body and having a lot of influence over minimum the Kuiper Belt, Neptune, and Uranus, I would say.
Very good. I thought we'd go through the images first and then come back and as we want to further discuss them, depending which image you think, best illustrates what we're talking about. Here's another one. So like you can see, this is a very dense, huge cloud, even outside of the Kuiper Belt, but it completely surrounds us like a shell. And so let's see what else we got here. Here's another one showing the Oort Cloud. And it's, hundreds of thousands of, I don't know, is that years or distance here? This is an interstellar space. So that would be between stars. And this is what you were talking about, the heliosphere and how the planets are arranged.
Right. It's usually called AU, which is, I believe, astronomical unit, which is a distance from the Earth to the sun, I believe. That's what those numbers are depicting. But it's way, way out. It's actually way past the Kuiper Belt. Yeah.
And then I think, I guess this is the last image. So my question is very, very simple. And that is, if we're standing on the Earth, looking up at what we call the heavens or the sky, the nighttime sky, right? And we see these consistent constellations that give me the impression that what we see above us is actually like a giant clock marking the seasons, all kinds of things that we would need to know even just for our basic survival and make sure we're warm enough in the winter, we have everything we need, all those kind of things. But also, as you have described in one of your or several of your astrology lectures, it also has influence over humankind and everything. So my question is that if I'm standing on a little planet and on the Earth, and if I'm located on the Earth where I would see the Kuiper Belt, then wouldn't that obstruct some of that vision of the stars and constellations that are outside of what we call interstellar space? And then even more so, if you were looking out at the nighttime sky, we would obviously be in nights, we'd be on the opposite side of the sun. But how would we be able to see through this huge shell as to what's going on outside of that shell? To me, that just, I don't seem to be able to wrap my head around it. I was wondering what you have to say about that.
Okay, the whole system, first of all, is a created solar system. It's created with specific laws. It has local laws, and actually the local laws apply anywhere within that Oort cloud. The Oort cloud, you're right, Karen, that's the edge. It's the edge of the heliosphere, which means the sun doesn't have any, our sun doesn't have any influence past the edge of the Oort cloud. That's when you start getting really other solar systems. And then the two, basically, if you think of it, that our entire solar system is within this sphere. And this is some of the confusion, I think, with flat Earth too, is that there's the disk that's in play and there's the sphere that's in play. They're both in play at the same time. And in order, in my opinion, to understand it the best way possible, we have to understand both of them and how they both fit in the actual model. But anyway, so if you look at this image that you're seeing here, imagine that sphere. Everything contained within that is our solar system, and that's the edge of our solar system. There's many, really infinite, probably, solar systems that look probably somewhat similar to this model that you're seeing here. And they're all floating together around what's called the central sun. And that's when it gets into, in the show that we did, Karen, last time with the different calendars, we talked about the Vedic calendar from India and the Mayan calendar and everything. All these independent globe systems, not the Earth being a globe, but the system being a globe, are all moving around the central sun together. So you have all of these solar systems now together, and they're confined to their own small units, not small really, but their own units within these spheres. Think of it like all these little tiny bubbles. Like if you're at like a picnic and you have a kid that blows some bubbles or something, you see how many of these bubbles that are everywhere up in the air, and they're all like relatively close to each other, but they're not usually stuck to each other and everything. Imagine all of those, each one of those being a solar system, and each one of them having an Oort cloud. And then all of that is moving around the central sun together, which is where the Vedic system of time, the different yugas, that's where those come from. It's a 4.32 million year cycle. And all these contained spheres, each being a solar system, are going around the central sun together. But they influence each other, but the local influence is within that system, which means it's within that sphere you're looking at. Okay, so then the second thing I want to address is that all of the stars, supposedly, this is according to the solar system model of the ancients, is that all of the stars that we can see are actually contained within our system. This is when it gets really weird. It's really hard to understand this. And so I don't even know what astronomers say anymore. I haven't been on that track for so long. I listen, but I want to see more. Give me more evidence. It's not enough for me. The ancients said that the Earth is at the center as a disk, as a flat disk. And then actually the sun is in the third sphere, number 3, above the Earth, as opposed to what we've been taught, which is that the Earth is the third planet from the sun. The ancient model says it's actually opposite to that the sun is sitting in the third sphere. And then above that, in the 8th sphere, you have all of the stars. That's called the fixed stars. Right. And it's ruled by the planet of Uranus. And then, okay, so when you're looking up and out, when you're seeing the stars, and by the way, they really don't look that far, do they? The stars don't look that far. And that's the other thing, is that the sun and the moon, they really don't look, moon does not look like it's 240,000 miles away. If you were to ask a kid, be like, yeah, it's pretty close, because I think it is. And I think the sun also is, and actually all the planets. But when you look up there, you're seeing what's called the fixed stars in the 8th sphere, which is ruled by Uranus. So the Kuiper Belt would actually be at the edge or contained within the 9th sphere. So the Kuiper Belt is outside it's past the stars. It's past the fixed stars. I would assume that's why you can get pretty clear images of the stars, is because it's actually you don't have to look through the Kuiper Belt to see the stars. And this is based on what I believe is the correct model, which is the ancient model. You're looking first at the stars, and then past that is the Kuiper Belt and Neptune and Pluto, and then the 10th planet, which I believe is Nibiru, and then the Oort Cloud at the very edge of that, which contains the entire system. But I hope that explains some of it, Karen.
Actually, that makes perfect sense to me, because like I said, if I'm standing on Earth and I'm looking out at the heavens, and if the constellations, as we've been previously told, or in mainstream science, are supposed to be outside of the Oort cloud, how are we able to see with the human eye and with just fairly simple telescopes? How are we able to see outside of the Kuiper Belt and the Oort cloud? To me, that makes no sense at all. The constellations would have to be within the Kuiper Belt for us to see them.
Yep, that's correct. I believe that's correct. I really do. And that explains why it's a localized system. And, if you're right, Karen. I mean, if you're looking through a huge amount of pretty small icy bodies, it's going to be reflecting like crazy. And then on top of that, past that, you have a huge amount of distance. And then, I mean, it's actually really an unfathomable amount of distance between the Kuiper Belt and the edge of the Oort cloud. It's like, what did I write down here? 2,000 is 2,000 to 200,000 AU. And 1 AU, I believe, is the distance from the Earth to the sun. So you can imagine how far that is. And the Kuiper Belt is only, it's between Neptune and 50 AU from the sun. So the edge of the Kuiper Belt is roughly at 50 AU. The Oort cloud doesn't even start until 2000 AU. So there's a huge amount of quote unquote empty space out there, which I believe I don't believe it's empty at all. I believe probably everything that's there is likely invisible to humans. It's not in a spectrum that we can see. And it's a very, 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 it's the highest spiritual level within our solar system. And I believe that's occupied by the Anunnaki and Nibiru. They're probably sitting in between, on their planet, in between the Kuiper Belt and the Oort cloud, is what I'm assuming. And then the Oort cloud it's the edge. Once you get out of the Oort cloud, you're actually free of our solar system. And then you can begin to understand. And here's the thing too, Karen, is that we have so many extraterrestrial races some of them are living beneath us. There's also 10 spheres below the Earth in the traditional model. So some of them are occupying that realm. Some of them are living right on Earth in different frequencies. We can't necessarily see them. Some of them actually, this is their home. And then some of them are coming from any ET rays coming from above the Earth, I believe, are going to be benevolent. Higher and higher levels of benevolence, the higher you get up towards the 10th sphere, which would be Nibiru. And you also have the entire star system in the 8th sphere, which contains, I'm sure, countless, infinite numbers of other extraterrestrial races. So this is still within, all of these things are still within our solar system. And there's I don't know how many billions or trillions of solar systems going around the central sun. Which is the galaxy. So, we can't even conceive seriously of how large this is, and that this is just, and then that's just one galaxy, and that's just one central sun. So the universe is infinite. I'm thankful for that.
Yep, I agree. So my reasons to not trust what NASA or the scientists that are supposed to be the experts about our solar system and our galaxy, the reasons I don't trust them is, number one, like I said in the beginning, the light would be reflected from these icy pieces or whatever they are, whether they're rock and metal or just ammonia and different chemicals. We would see some evidence of them being there. The next thing is, how would we see the constellations if they're outside of the Oort cloud? That makes no sense to me at all. Cannot wrap my head around that. And by the way, I'm neither a sphere earther or a flat earther. I'm in the, I don't really know. I haven't been, outside of our atmosphere to take a look. So I have tried through astral projection, which is interesting, but that's, I guess, basically, I'll just tell you quickly. I've been trying through astral projection and remote viewing to take a look at our solar system from the outside, and also to take a look at, the Earth from the outside. And a funny thing happens. I get to a certain point, and then it's almost like my mind switches to a completely different subject. So I never actually get to see it. So, but I'm going to keep trying. So the other reason that, is, like I said, how would we be able to see through these huge debris fields into constellations that are outside? The constellations have to be inside the Kuiper Belt. It doesn't work any other way. And the other reason why I don't believe mainstream science is because they're lying about everything. We're finding out now, wow, civilizations that we were told didn't exist or were hundreds of thousands or maybe tens of thousands of years ago. And we're finding out, no, that was all reset. And, there's just so much lies that we can't, and fabrications that we can't really believe anything. Look what we're finding out about medical science, today. Look what we're finding out about these megalithic structures, and on and on and on. So it wasn't even that long ago we had global communication, global energy, global travel. We have root language that all the languages have come from. So the evidence is really showing that a lot of so-called experts are what I would call big fat liars. So I just want to see if I have another.
Karen, while you're looking for that, I'd like to add something.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so I would say one of the first accounts, if not the first account that we have of someone being able to observe the solar system, is Enoch. You probably are aware of that story. And he went up there and he was able to see everything. And it's in the book of Enoch. I highly encourage people to read it. It's one of the finest books on the planet. It actually describes the flat earth model. Okay, and this was taken out of the Bible, but we have the text that survived in the Ethiopian Bible, I believe. Is the primary source. And the thing is that he also describes the vaults, the vaulted heaven. He got to see all of that. He saw the planets. And then when he gets to the ninth sphere, he describes the crystalline sea. He actually describes it. And I believe he described it as, this is not a direct quote, but basically it wasn't quite water, but it was shimmering. And it's, to me, that really sounds like a force field, actually, is what I think that is. And that also supports astrology, the way I teach it, and what the ninth sphere represents, which is the dream world. The ninth sphere is the dream world. So if you have like a semi-aqueous solution that is possibly also composed partly of icy particles and icy bodies and stuff, it's kind of like somewhere in between liquid and like a solid and like a gas maybe. And it is shimmering, though. He described it as shimmering. Enoch described it that way. It's like we already have the description. He already made it for us, however many thousands of years ago. So he got to see it, Karen. He was up there observing it. And the other thing I wanted to add about, in terms of people lying and about science sometimes lying and stuff like that, it's actually really, really easy for me. This is how I do it. Every conclusion I have, I call it a working conclusion, which means I'm always open to new data or new evidence. Always. And that's actually good science. It's that I can tell you what I think it is, but if something new comes up and it makes sense for me to look at it, if it's well supported and it contradicts what I believe, then I am, as a good scientist, I am forced to consider that in terms of I need to relook at my conclusion. And by the way, I do every time. I'm not biased. All I'm doing is I'm working with data. If the data says that, I have to go where the data is, not what I want. It's where the data is. It's actually, we're talking about this too, is that in terms of astrology, I don't necessarily like that astrology is in place because it severely limits the freedom that we have, or in the free will that we have. But it also is, it's also a boon, which means that it can help you and assist you. And it can also provide karma too. But the thing is that ideally you don't want to have anything hampering your free will. You should be able to travel freely through the solar system, actually, in a light body, and through the entire universe, go wherever you feel comfortable and safe, or if you want to explore things. We can't really do that now. And so the thing I believe is that, like I said, I'm always open to good data, no matter, even if it contradicts me. I have no problem with that. But I do expect people to be civil. You don't have to start bashing someone. I mean, I will leave the conversation, because it's not about that. You have to keep your tone appropriate. You have to keep the kindness level appropriate. Try to keep the friendliness there. And all we're doing is I'm saying, this is what I believe. This is my evidence. This is what you believe. This is your evidence. And then that's it. I'm not expecting them to come to my side. They shouldn't be expecting me to come to their side. And if humans can't like civilly engage like that in a conversation, it's, I'm not going to change my mind unless there's a good reason to, but I'm willing to listen to anyone that has good data. And in terms of NASA, like what you're saying with NASA, you're right. And it's not just NASA, it's everything. Like you said, it's the medicine system, it's a political system. It seems like everything is not what it's been taught to be. It's like, it's basically all a lie. And the issue is, there's actually a really easy way to solve that. It's the following. All you have to do is be willing to entertain other people's beliefs, especially when you have good supporting data. That's important for me. Not just, I mean, I can listen to people's opinions all day, but for me, I don't have huge amounts of free time, so I need to see some good data. And then I'll sit there for hours while you explain it to me, but I need to see the data. If the populace, and if people say, okay, you know what, I don't believe you, I think you've been lying or whatever, well, guess what? Here's a great opportunity for you to make me look like an idiot if I'm incorrect. Okay, so if you really want to make me not say anything anymore, then this is your opportunity. And guess all you have to do? Show us the evidence. Give us something to work with instead of your word, which to me is, not necessarily worth anything at all. So if someone's saying, hey, I think that this is good, Karen, someone's saying, hey, I think the planets are all CGI. Okay, well, the NASA should say, you know what? We're going to get like 20 or 30 independent research groups. We're going to get all of them to make their own craft, people who have no interest in any of these government programs or anything. And we're all going to send our craft out there. And let's see what we all come back with. Let's see if a few of us are just completely full of crap. Maybe a few of us have agreement on what we observed and everything. But until you can get, and this is, again, good science, until you can get multiple sources confirming something, multiple, by the way, independent sources that have no affiliations and they have nothing, no vested interests that could possibly corrupt their data.
Yeah.
You get everyone up there, you all get your data collected independently, then you have a civil discussion about it. That's how you do it. So if they're not willing to do that, then I'm really not willing to listen, because you're not even playing by fair rules. It's like, hey, this is what Pluto looks like. Well, and you should probably seen this too. I don't mind saying this. To me, I've seen a few memes and stuff. It actually looks like the Disney character Pluto that we all know from the Disney movies, that they superimposed his image, did some CGI shading on it, and then when the first image of Pluto came up, they decided, oh yeah, let's just sneak in this Disney character with the same name, and people aren't going to notice, they won't see that. Oh, come on, guys. It's like that. If you don't have a good explanation for that, then I'm out forever, because you just straight lied, and I don't do that. So
yeah, Dave,
people are not as dumb as they think we are.
That's totally true. Totally. I'm sorry, we're running out of time here. So I just want to finish up by saying that what you just said is exactly what I was asking. Why is there no photographic evidence? Like, that makes no sense. I've tried for years to find an actual legitimate photograph of planet Earth from outer space, or even from when they were so-called traveling to the moon, and I've never been able to find it. So number one, that is like the easiest thing to just show right away. But no, we're not given that. So they're withholding that for a reason. They wouldn't withhold it without having a reason. The other thing that I think is interesting is my spiritual contacts and ET contacts have assured me that our solar system is under quarantine until humans evolve to the point that they're not going to take their bullshit out into other realities. And I'm talking here about the three-dimensional solar system, because I think there is also fourth, fifth, sixth, different dimensional solar systems attached as well, or somehow, I'm not sure exactly how it works. But yep. My point is the Oort, if there was the Kuiper Belt, if there was the Oort Cloud, it seems to support a bit of a quarantine on humanity, and for some very, very good reasons. Now, yeah, we're out of time, Dave, but I'm just wondering, do you have a few last minute things you want to say? Maybe mention that what you're gonna be getting into on your show on Friday night?
Yeah, let me just, I'll first respond to I'll first
respond to sure, go ahead.
What you said, Karen, is that it is a contained system. Our solar system is a contained system. And I agree with you, actually. I believe it's primarily probably as a quarantine, because if you had people or spirits, let's say spirits, because spirits are in all forms. They go in different avatars. Some are humans, some are animals, plants, what have you. If you had free reign of the universe wants to know, what are you going to do? That's the whole thing. And so apparently, I don't believe that's the reason we're all here. I believe that's probably what the majority of us are here, actually, is because we have some stuff we need to clean up before we have free will or higher levels of free will. So you're right. It's that there was a system that was created is like a detention, really, almost. You could call it exile, call it whatever you want. Probation, I like to call it probation, actually. It's okay, so let's see how your heart is, and let's see how your actions support your heart. And then at the end of your life, we're going to decide, like, let's say the council, Karen, and we can talk about that a whole different show, but let's say there's very, very wise divine spirits and forms and figures who are watching, supervising us. Well, when it's your time to come before them, they already know what you did. Don't even try to lie. They can see it. They can play it back and forward like a movie, like a timeline. They can show you, and just so you know that they know. Don't try to pull one on them. And then if what you have become, how your heart is sitting, and your actions, if they match something that's consistent with you deserving a higher level of existence, then you will be promoted. And on the other side, if it doesn't, then you're going to be demoted. And within our solar system, the quarantine, the big Oort Cloud sphere, there's a minimum of 21 different dimensions that you can exist in, which would be the flat earth at the center, which I call purgatory. And then the 10 spheres are the heavens above, and the 10 spheres are the hells below. And then basically at the end of your life, you're going to end up in various different avatars and forms in any one of those 21 dimensions. Quantum physics makes it a much larger system. I'm not going to even get into that because it's going to be a lot bigger of a topic, but you're right. It's actually, there's also 21 dimensions within every dimension. And it's actually really probably fractaled ad infinitum.
Yep.
It
would pretty much have to be. It's like a tesseract. It's infinity being infinity that's being funneled into finite time and space. It's quite I know this is another whole discussion. Dave, I'm going to have you back because there's so many things we can talk about. I was thinking while you were talking, we don't really have time to get into it, but even astrology, maybe that is a way of containing humanity so we don't really cause trouble, and maybe it's actually on this earthly plane in the three-dimensional I'm speaking, maybe it's an important kind of a safety device, and but anyway, that's all we're out of time, Dave. I have to say goodbye, but I really appreciate you being on the show. Please, everybody, check out Dave's show Friday night. Check out his Facebook. If you forget the name, the link will be there. And it's been really good to have you on the show. Thank you so much, Dave. One last word?
One
Sure.
last sentence. I'll just leave everyone with this to think about. And please come see my show Friday. Thanks, Karen, for that. Okay. Astrology is an ascension and or descension machine. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, we'll have to do a show on that. Okay, take care, everybody. See you next week on the Quantum Guide Show. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for the Quantum Guide Show. Become the change you wish to see in the world. Subscribe to Karen's YouTube channel, click the like button, and share this show with your friends. Check out Karen's website at KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com. All the links are available in the description box below. Until the next time, keep up the good work.
Endlessness puts all my inner strife to rest, for time gives birth to hurriedness. It all makes sense, well, more or less, and the sages put me to their test. With heart and soul I do my best to find the answers to my quest. I wonder and I must confess, I don't know where it comes from, but I know it's okay. If this is all in